Welcome to our podcast. Today we're diving into a really provocative idea. What if Christianity, as we know it, actually emerged out of Roman philosophy, specifically Stoicism?
That's quite a thought. So, are we basically saying that instead of being a divine revelation, Christianity might have been more like a rebranding of older philosophical ideas?
Exactly. It raises the question, what if Jesus was less a founder of an entirely new heavenly religion and more of a reformer who repackaged Stoic philosophy for the Roman world?
Wow, interesting. So basically, instead of a break from pagan rituals, Christianity could be seen as an evolution of certain accepted Roman ideas?
Yeah, it's like, reusing a blueprint. The Roman Stoics, they were the moral elite teaching that the universe runs on a kind of divine reason, the logos. And guess what? The Gospel of John starts with, "In the beginning was the logos," which smacks of Greek metaphysics, not traditional Jewish theology.
Right, so that opening line in John might actually be hinting at something more philosophical than previously believed.
Absolutely. And then you have Paul, who basically architected Christian doctrine. He wasn't just about Jesus crucified. He actually quoted Stoic poets and structured his rhetoric like a Roman orator. For example, in Acts 17, he even uses a line that echoes the Stoic poet Aratus, saying, "We are his offspring."
That's wild. So, could we interpret Paul's rhetoric as kind of a deliberate nod to the dominant intellectual culture of Rome?
Yeah, exactly. It's like, he was tapping directly into a pre-existing moral framework that most Romans respected. Stoicism was all about self-mastery, rational thought, and acceptance of fate. Ideals that, interestingly, mirror key Christian values like inner transformation and the notion of rebirth.
So both systems were preaching that power comes from within, that you refine your soul through suffering, and that living in harmony with nature or God is the highest calling.
Right, although there's a twist. Stoicism strictly views God as an impersonal force, a kind of rational principle governing the cosmos, while Christianity sees God as a personal, loving
Yeah,
Father. And Stoics believed in salvation through virtue, while Christians emphasize faith.
so, while they sound similar on the surface, they diverge in some crucial ways, don't they?
They do. For instance, think about the view on emotional expression. Stoics valued emotional restraint, even considering suicide as an honorable exit from tyranny. In contrast, Christianity not only frowns upon suicide but celebrates the raw humanity of Jesus, who wept, raged, and bled.
That's a sharp contrast. It almost feels like they're two sides of the same coin, sharing ideas, but dressed in entirely different garments. But,
Right.
don't you think that might be oversimplifying the nuance in each tradition?
I get that point, and it is a stretch sometimes. Yet the parallels run deep enough that it makes you wonder if early Christians, especially thinkers like Paul, were consciously adapting Stoic reasoning to a new theological framework.
It kind of challenges the whole concept of divine revelation, doesn't it? If Paul's writings borrow from Stoic thought, then Christianity might be more about cultural adaptation than a celestial mandate.
Exactly. And think about figures like Seneca, Epictetus, and Marcus Aurelius. Their teachings on topics like mercy, life's hardships, and self-discipline are so strikingly similar to what Jesus preached. I mean, who wouldn't notice the overlap? It's almost as if two different schools of thought were trying to solve the same human dilemmas.
Yeah, and that brings us to an essential point: the blending of ideas in a multicultural, multi-philosophical Roman society. Would you say that the Roman environment simply fostered these syncretic ideas?
I'd say so. The Roman Empire was like an intellectual melting pot. You had Greek philosophy, Jewish traditions, and, of course, Stoic ideas all in one place. So it's not surprising that early Christian thinkers might remix these ingredients to create something that resonated with the masses.
True, but isn't there a risk in overemphasizing the Stoic influence? I mean, Christianity also has its independent claims, miracles, resurrection, and so on, that defy a mere philosophical interpretation.
That's a very good point. There's a clear tension here. On one hand, you have um, profound mythic elements and divine claims, and on the other, you see rational, almost merciless philosophical underpinnings pulled from Stoicism. It's a
Mm-hmm.
delicate balance. I think some scholars argue that Christianity might have, in part, adapted Stoic thought to make the radical message of Jesus more palatable and intellectually respectable in a pagan society.
That's fascinating. So it's almost like a cultural remix, where ancient ideas were repackaged to address new societal needs?
Yeah, exactly, like a philosophical collage. Christianity and Stoicism both taught that suffering, if properly faced, refines us, whether that's through inner virtue or spiritual rebirth, and in that sense, they weren't so much rivals as they were unexpected allies in the quest for personal transformation.
I love that image, a kind of mystical handshake between philosophy and faith.
Right? It's like they were speaking the same language, just with different accents. The Stoics talked about living according to nature, and Christians talked about being born again.
Yeah,
They both sought a higher, more virtuous existence.
but then there's still the nuance. The Stoics saw life as subject to a rational cosmic order, while Christianity hinges on a personal God intervening in human affairs. How do we reconcile that?
Well, that's where the remix really comes into play. It's possible that the Stoic idea of the Logos provided an intellectual bridge. It allowed early Christians to frame their narrative in terms the Roman audience could appreciate, by using familiar philosophical terminology to describe
Mm-hmm.
something new. But, of course, the personal aspect of God, Jesus' humanity, those were revolutionary twists that set Christianity apart.
I see, so it's a fusion. Adaptation plus innovation. But I'm still a bit skeptical. Could it be that we're reading too much into these similarities? Maybe they converge naturally, given that both traditions aim to answer life's big questions.
That's a valid critique. It might just be a case of convergent evolution in thought. However, the direct textual echoes, like Paul's use of Stoic references, suggest a more deliberate borrowing. It's like finding the same signature phrase in two different genres of
Yeah,
music. It raises eyebrows, doesn't it?
definitely. And what about this idea that if Stoicism paved the way for Christianity, then the cross, as a symbol, might be less a disruption in history and more a natural evolution of existing cultural narratives?
Yeah, it's intriguing to consider. Was the cross a radical break from the past? Or was it simply the next logical step in a long philosophical conversation about human suffering and redemption? The notion is, maybe, instead of a sudden divine overhaul, Christianity was an adaptation to the ongoing story of human morality in Rome.
That kind of recontextualizes the whole story. It suggests that our religious narratives are more like, um, layered interpretations built on centuries of thought, rather than entirely new revelations.
Exactly. It forces us to revisit the origin story not as a clash of divine versus human, but as a rich tapestry woven together from various strands of ancient wisdom. And interestingly, some early Christians like Justin Martyr and Clement of Alexandria actually recognize this link, arguing that Greek philosophy, including Stoicism, was a kind of precursor to the truth revealed in Christianity.
That definitely shakes things up. It means those very ideas that were considered pagan or secular might have actually been instrumental in preparing people for the Christian message.
Right. And think about how this impacts modern believers. If Christianity's foundations are more a blend of divine revelation and ancient philosophy, then the faith could be seen as less about being set apart from the world and more about tapping into a universal moral conversation that spans centuries. It's both comforting and challenging.
It is. It challenges the exclusivity of divine origin while embracing a broader cultural tapestry. That might, however, unsettle those who hold a strictly literal interpretation of Scripture.
Absolutely. It's not an attempt to diminish the spiritual experiences of believers, but rather to understand that human thought, even in the realm of the divine, is influenced by the cultural and historical milieu it arises in.
Yeah,
It's like discovering that a family recipe has secret ingredients passed down from different cultures over generations.
that's a great analogy. And it almost turns the narrative on its head. What if Jesus wasn't inventing a completely new idea, but rather reinterpreting and revitalizing time-honored values?
Yeah, exactly. Instead of a sudden supernatural intervention, it might have been, a sophisticated intellectual adaptation, a rebranding of the familiar in a way that resonated with the Roman world's thirst for meaning.
Incredible. Whether you see it as a deliberate fusion or a natural convergence, it definitely invites us to think differently about the roots of our most enduring beliefs.
Right. And if this idea opened your mind or even made you a bit uncomfortable, it's worth exploring further. After all, understanding the past, with all its complexities, can only deepen our appreciation of today's beliefs.
Absolutely. There's so much to unpack in how philosophy and faith intertwine. Thanks for walking through this provocative exploration. There's plenty more to discuss in our next session.
Totally. Till then, keep questioning and stay curious.